Hello, welcome back to another day in the arena and in the adventures of young CGB. It's me, it's CGB, and we are looking over our account today after a weekend out doing all kinds of things and not playing much Magic. So our quests have piled up a little bit. It's important to try to get in when you're working on your free-to-play grind. Try to log in every 3 days at least and knock out your quests. So what do we got? 20 black or blue spells, 40 creature spells, and 30 blue or black spells. It's kind of interesting having these blue and black spells line up because we just worked on a blue and black deck if you watched our last video. The 40 creature spells might be difficult with a control-based deck, but since the other ones line up so nice, I think it's very clear that we should give our blue-black control deck a shot. Looking around at things I might want to change, since Scatter has been on the rise among the in-the-know players, we might also want to spend an uncommon wild card and just raise our Glimmer of Genius count. I think both of those are good ideas. When I'm looking around at what to cut, I feel like Blink of an Eye might be the kind of card that this deck doesn't need nearly as much. We don't have a way to deal with enchantments or with artifacts, which does leave a little hole, so maybe we want to make a few adjustments. One thing that we can do differently is have a Gonti, which can try to get us a solution to artifacts and enchantments from our opponent's deck. It's kind of a crafty, very blue and black way to do it. A Chupacabra might also be good, but both of those kind of require the Scarab God in more numbers and more Reanimator. We're not really a Reanimator deck. We only have one Scarab God, so I don't think those are right at the moment. I am going to bump up my Glimmer of Genius count. And I'm going to check really quickly if I have an Essence Scatter. Some of these cards are printed in multiple sets. I know that sounds weird, but this is from Amonkhet, and it's from M19. You can tell by the mana symbol. Now, if you are over here on the Amonkhet version and you hit the button to increase your count, it will ask you if you want to use a wild card. We don't want to throw away our wild cards, so make sure that you search up a card and make sure that you don't have duplicates of it. It shows up on a different line. But there's no reason to spend our wild cards that way if we don't have to. Moving, yep, I'm going to try it without the blink of an eye and see if any artifacts or enchantments just totally roast me. Because of that. I'm also going to trim one of the Syncopates. We're going to go down to 2 while keeping the murders. The Syncopate, though, that count may need to go back up. We'll see how some games go. When I look at the colors, blue is a little heavier than black, and I don't think, I mean, that's basically reflected right now in the mana base between 4 islands, 3 Memorial to Genius. We also have a lot of other tap lands. I'm actually going to trim a Memorial to Genius and go up to a 5th island because we just got another Glimmer of Genius, making Memorial to Geniuses not quite as important. So those are some of the adjustments I'm going to make. I'm going to enter a quick constructed. I don't know if I'll be able to finish it with one video, so we're going to have to find out. But we're going to dive into a quick constructed event, see if we can get to 7 wins, see if we can win our gold back here at the start of the week, get things kicked off on the right foot. I'm feeling much better than last week. If you watched that video, I was getting kind of depressed. I certainly wasn't feeling well, and I certainly don't think I was playing well, but I had a really good weekend. It was a very taxing and exhausting weekend, but much was accomplished. Many good things happened. So I'm excited to get back into it and to get the competitive CGB out of his cage and really go after these games. For those who might be watching for the first time, just a quick recap. We're on a completely free-to-play account. We are not going to spend any money on any gems. We're not going to acquire gems by any way other than playing the game. We're not going to acquire gold by any way other than playing the game. We are starting our 3rd week. So in our first week, we played a red-black starter deck, which I've made a few videos about, and we did pretty well. By the end of the week, we added a lot of cards to that red-black deck. We still have it. Then the 2nd week, we just kind of ground out quests with various decks, including mono black and black white. At the end of the week, we unlocked some cards that I think were needed for control decks, and that's where we are today, giving that control deck, which we just unlocked some cards for, a proper spin, a proper test. This hand is okay. I'm nervous. We do have 2 black sneakily through an Aether Hub. I'm nervous about finding more, but we don't have that many cards that are double black. It's really just the murders. So if we get one murder cast with it, then the only thing that could really punish us is a second murder. Plus we have a Field of Ruin hanging out. Let's see, we're holding on to this Evolving Wilds, letting it sit there, letting the opponent wonder what we might be doing. Opponents can, especially on the draw, play differently based on what lands you present. So we're going to sacrifice this on our end step. That is the right way to do it. I think people do it too often. I think when you're on the play, it doesn't make a lot of difference, as the opponent on the draw doesn't have many decisions they can make. And I think that it's generally just a little annoying to click through everything when all you're waiting on is an Evolving Wilds trigger. So I don't do it all the time, but I am trying to showcase, well, the right mix of entertainment and commentary, and of course, some play skill. So, we found our other double black card, Vraska's Contempt, which I didn't mention before. You have my apologies. Also, we found an artifact we're going to have a hard time dealing with, so already the game is off to not a great start. I don't think I'm going to see something to play this murder on. I'm going to play this Field of Ruin in case something like something shows up that I could cast this Field of Ruin on. But I doubt that will happen. Our opponent looks like they're mono white. And Johnny's Pridemate on the way down. It doesn't have an enter the battlefield trigger, so I'll let that one resolve, and I'll save the murder for something with an enters the battlefield trigger, like a Militia Bugler, or something different. Our opponent, though, they're just going to stick to that. All right. Play our land and say go. And we'll see how they want to proceed. Only playing one creature at a time is, I would call, interesting. If they're playing around sweepers, then we want to make sure to proceed very carefully. I'm not going to use a murder right this second. I'm going to let this damage happen. I want to see what my opponent does next. Okay, they're passing the turn, so now I'm going to murder the Pridemate. Since they haven't given me a better target or done anything else with their mana, they either don't have creatures in hand at all, which would be strange, or they have multiple creatures and they're trying not to walk into a sweeper, which would be kind of just a cautious play line. The problem with it is it gives us time to set up and play cards like Torrential Gearhulk. So hopefully we can take advantage of how cautiously they're playing. I'm confident if we had murdered the Johnny's Pridemate in combat and they had another creature, they would go ahead and play it, and we'd be attacked for more damage this turn. As it is, there's just a token on the way. It also makes the odds of cast out and removal spells higher from our opponent when they're not playing creatures in this situation. We have just the one murder in the graveyard. I would love to draw... I'd love to draw a Glimmer of Genius, as right now playing the Gearhulk doesn't sound absolutely fantastic. I would love a much stronger blowout than murdering a token. So let's wait and see what our opponent does. Shalai, the Voice of Plenty. Now that's a proper target. I'm going to let it resolve because I have Vraska's Contempt to remove it. And Vraska's Contempt is a great card to flash back with the Torrential Gearhulk, as it gains life and helps us survive longer against these white decks and their little dorky creatures. So again, we're waiting till end step. Now here on the end step, we'll cast Vraska's Contempt on Shalai. It's the only legal target right now, of course, because it gives hexproof to all the other creatures. Opponent's looking around, seeing if they have options. It gives away that they have something they can do at instant speed, but I'm guessing it's in the nature of cycling a cast out, something like that. We draw a Negate, counters a non-creature spell. Our opponent could also have multiple Oketra's Monuments in their hand, which would make a lot of sense because this card is legendary. Playing another one doesn't help them. And I've certainly been in that spot playing the Monument deck. You want to run 4 monuments usually, sometimes 3, but usually 4, because it's such an important part of your deck. But when you draw multiples, they just don't do anything. They sit in your hand, sadly. Again, I'm going to accept this damage. It's not a big deal, and I want something, I guess something more interesting to hit with my Torrential Gearhulk. If I'm going to Gearhulk and get a Vraska's Contempt, I want it to be a good target. I'll even wait if my opponent does nothing. I will wait for a better target. A Fairgrounds Warden. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that perhaps our opponent could be holding more of. So I'll go to my turn and we'll run out the Torrential Gearhulk on the end step. I think I do want to keep using the Vraska's Contempt. It's hard to imagine exactly what my opponent could have. Maybe an Oketra the True would be a problem, but when I have an Essence Scatter, I'm not worried about it. So I think that the 2 life could matter more than whether or not the creature necessarily needs to be exiled. Okay, our opponent did have a cast out. Now, if I'd wait another turn, I could have Negate open, but having a second Gearhulk is the reason I'm not as concerned. And I am going to exile the Fairgrounds Warden. Our opponent likely plays Dusk to Dawn, a card that can get it back from the graveyard. Having it exiled just takes care of that problem. And now I definitely believe I want to wait to play this Gearhulk till the next combat step. Having Negate to protect it this time would be very nice. So again, we're taking damage, we're passing turn. Not very exciting, I know, control decks. Oh, control decks. And now we draw a Glimmer of Genius, which may also be a reason to wait. But it's important to be patient. You need to protect your life total at some point, but I don't get very worried about it until I'm under 10. Of course, circumstances are different depending on what deck you're up against and how things go. But right now I'm not feeling very defensive of it. I like the way things are going. More time means getting more cards, having the right answers, the right options, more resources, like lands on the battlefield to do more things in a turn. Control decks relish this. All right, I think it's going to be time to play the Torrential Gearhulk now because we have Glimmer of Genius in the graveyard. And it can certainly ambush a token, and then we have just a bigger creature on the board. Our opponent will have more tokens, of course. We're getting to a point where we might want to fatally push them, but not quite yet. All right, I definitely want to use my Field of Ruin for the mana, and then here it comes. I don't mind using energy on my Aether Hub to produce mana of any color. I don't conserve it because there's no other big time use for the energy. There's Glint-Sleeve Siphoners, but we haven't seen those. And as it is, they would already be able to draw cards for many turns if we found one. So I value the flexibility. So here is a cast out. Now I'll use it for colorless now that I'm sure I know what to do with it. Let's negate. Make our opponent find another solution. Another Gearhulk is wonderful. I'll take it. All the Gearhulks all the time. We'll throw a block here. I'm still holding Fatal Push. I'm sure my opponent has other creatures that are better to Fatal Push than these tokens. Like I said, it's white. They don't have ways to deal much direct damage. I'm not feeling protective of my life total based on what I'm seeing. And now we do have a Siphoner, so that can help beat us more cards. We have 2 more Gearhulks with a Negate in the graveyard. So yeah, things are starting to look up. Can we attack? We could. And in fact, I don't see a big reason not to. The sooner you can pressure your opponent's life total with the Gearhulks, the better. They may have Seal Away, which is a card, and it is an annoying card. But I don't think it matters very much, and I'm happy to let my Torrential Gearhulk go at this time. Our opponent likely has a lot of removal in hand to work through. Making them work through it seems like a fine idea. I don't like competing over removal spells unless I'm sure I'm about to win. And playing out my Gearhulks multiples at a time doesn't seem great if they have Dusk to Dawn. So I want to be careful about when I play them. All right, the 1/1 tokens are coming. What do we have down here? Murder? It's not great, but I like to continue to keep my opponent guessing, I suppose. Keep them reacting. They might have another cast out here and something like that. They do have 4 cards. It's hard to tell what they are. It's easy to assume one is probably an Oketra's Monument, though. But it doesn't have to be. Murder this token. Block other token. It could trade with a Siphoner, but we do not want to trade our Siphoner when we can draw cards instead. And now that we can convert our life total into cards, it makes sense to protect it a little more. Our opponent's passing. So they could have Settle, they could have more Seal Away. We'll draw a card, and there is a good one. If our opponent does have Seal Away or Settle, let's get it out of their hand, because now we have the Scarab God. So let's move to combat. We also have Negate with Gearhulk. So we have a hidden counter spell. Another Seal Away. Do I want to fight that? We can get a Pridemate. That's all that we can get right now. I think we let this happen. It's fine. Plenty of Gearhulks to go. Our opponent might pick out the Siphoner, though. Don't want us drawing cards. They do eventually choose the Gearhulk. Third one locked down. All the exile. But one less exile effect in our opponent's hand. Right. We're actually 1 mana short of Gearhulk and Scarab God, but I think I still go for Scarab God. I think just having it on the board opens a lot of good doors. Our opponent will at least have to deal with the Scarab God and the creature it creates. And of course that creature, the only option right now is a Pridemate. And here's another Pridemate. Okay, I don't see a need to Essence Scatter that. Like I said, I want to save those for creatures with enter the battlefield abilities I wish to prevent. I can always Fatal Push a Pridemate whenever I feel like it. Let's go ahead and Scarab God up a Pridemate, though, so we can start being aggressive with a Pridemate of our own. And I think what I'm going to do is fatally push this Pridemate off the battlefield. That way I can, if I want to on my upkeep, get another Pridemate, get the Scry Drain thing going, and make a nice army out of my opponent's creatures. Classic Scarab God behavior. Vintage Scarab God. And really the card I want is just either a counter spell or an untapped land, so I can Torrential Gearhulk Negate. Just something to prevent a Settle of Wreckage if the opponent just drew it. Like, this is fine. This is just fine. It's an untapped land. I'll even keep the Fatal Push hanging out there in case we need it. Proceed to main, put down land, turn critters a sideways. Let's see if the opponent has yet another answer. There's a Settle the Wreckage, so our opponent goes for it. We'll play Torrential Gearhulk, and it will get back the Negate. Our opponent using a lot of control for a deck built around Oketra's Monument. I would caution anybody playing an Oketra's Monument deck on how many removal spells they can play. As you see, our opponent just couldn't really put pressure on us in the game. The time when we felt like we were behind or the game was at risk was when our opponent had a Monument and we had nothing going on. But since they only had 1 creature to play with it, it never got scary. Alright, there's nothing going on, I don't think. So, yeah, we don't need to pause there. Did I say I would like some counter spells? Well, I've been rewarded. Let's draw both of those. That should basically make sure that we don't get settled again anytime soon. And here they come. Our opponent's also drawn a lot of land. Well, I mean, even with us, but they don't want to draw as many lands as we do. Yep, another Settle the Wreckage. Opponent playing white control, I suppose. Problem with control decks that aren't blue, they don't have counter spells. They might be able to interact with creatures, but they can interact with other spells. Alright, one down. $250 gold, some quest progress. Let's get into another. Nice to see the blue-black control deck winning a little bit. Some crafted cards certainly helped. That Scarab God showed up. The Vraska's Contempt helped buffer our life total. All right, game face. Memorials, no black mana, but a Field of Ruin can get black mana. We're on the play. I'm going to keep this hand. It could go south. I really like if we're against mono red and this Field of Ruin doesn't get black and we never draw one. That's how we lose very badly, just by having a bad hand. However, for the most part, I think mulliganing on the play isn't something I like to do. And if I have 3 lands and I can cast like a spell and maybe another one, it's a really close one, but I'm going to keep it. And we'll play a Memorial to Genius. Our opponent without an early creature, and we drew a black source. Yay! Feels good. Of course, the game is always far from over. Let's go ahead and play our Field of Ruin, because we might be using it to go get a swamp on this foul orchard. It also creates Revolt, which can fatal push something, which is why we'll save it until our opponent's turn. And indeed, this is something to fatal push. When it dies, they get a 1/1, but I'm not worried about a 1/1. We saw last game that we could ignore 1/1s a good amount of time and just eventually overpower them. That's why 1/1 creatures for 1 are generally considered bad cards by a lot of longtime Magic players, unless they have super special abilities, because usually, while you can play them early and possibly get some damage in, they are just outshined by everything else going on the rest of the game. So Deathbloom Ballad is okay. You get a 3/2 on the front end, which is much better, but still a 1/1 on the leftover. You wouldn't play it just for the 1/1. All right, let's pass the turn and have Disallow available. Scarab God is already he's already ready to rumble if we find one more land. All right, Saprolings comes into play and makes another token. This is a good target for a Disallow because it has an Enter the Battlefield ability, whereas Murder and Cast Down are best on creatures that don't do anything when they enter the battlefield. So that's why we will disallow the Saprolings. A consideration not to would be to counter some kind of spell, but I'm not sure at this point what I would be saving it for. If our opponent had something strong like a Song of Freyalise, I think we'd have seen it. If they had a Spore Cloud, I think they would have played the Spore Cloud instead. They do have a Fungal Infection, which is annoying because it kills our Siphoner and makes a 1/1. And it makes me regret having Siphoners in this particular build, but what can you do? Best of 1. You register your deck and you go. Another Deathbloom. Interesting. So now I'm thinking about, do I want to cast down the Deathbloom now, or do I want to wait till my opponent's turn? It could save me a damage, but if I draw a land, I want to play the Scarab God. But if I play Scarab God, perhaps Deathbloom doesn't matter. I think I'll wait till my turn and see what we draw. Okay, Evolving Wilds. Our opponent's seen that we have Fatal Push, so we'll activate Evolving Wilds on our opponent's turn to at least give the impression we might fatally push something. Perhaps it changes the way that they want to play the game, knowing that we have Revolt for our Fatal Push. such as if they had another 4-drop creature that they didn't want to die, maybe they wouldn't play it. However, it doesn't look like they're really considering that, or if they would even care if this did get Fatal Push, as it doesn't do too much. So here comes the Sapherd, making tokens. And the Fungal Plots. So this says sacrifice 2 saprolings to gain 2 life and draw a card. And it also says exile a creature card from your graveyard. So this is a very annoying card and can really mess with our Scarab God if they handle things correctly. We're going to want to kill... Well, none of these are saprolings, so it doesn't matter if we kill anything right now with Murder or Cast Down. I'm trying to think of anything legendary in our opponent's deck, and I guess Slimefoot the Stowaway is a reason to save the Murder and use the Cast Down instead. Here he comes. So, yep, Cast Down on the Thallid. It is too bad, though, that our Scarab God couldn't be online right now, because Scarab God and Fungal Plots, as you're going to see, is an awkward dance. Our opponent can pay mana to exile the cards we target with the Scarab God if they so desire. We did draw another land. It'll be online next turn for a Gearhulk. That's nice to see. Hopefully our opponent doesn't randomly run their own Vraska's Contempts or something to kill Scarab here. And the card is Tendershoot Dryad, which is going to pump all of our opponent's creatures, and that will have to die. Without question, that will have to die. Okay, our opponent's moving at sorcery speed. We're going to block one of the 3/3s. I wish I had my Cast Down back, but now we need to draw a land so that we can Murder and use our Scarab God in the same turn. A Cast Down on this and 4 mana open would let us get the Tendershoot back, but we don't have the mana to do that right this minute. So we will let him have another token. We are at 4. We'll draw. It's a big draw step. It's not what we needed. So I think that leaves us dead. We can Gearhulk to kill the Tendershoot. Then we can block 1, 2. Yep, then we still die. And there's no way to gain life down there like a Vraska's Contempt. That's too bad. I guess we'll leave it to our opponent to figure out that they need to attack with everything, but I have faith in their ability to do math. And we need to cast some spells for our quests, so may as well do that. But the Tendershoot Dryad and the tokens our opponent made with Fungal Plots, it all added up to just enough. We came up a mana short from being able to kind of respond. It's too bad. And we'll see if our opponent sees that all they have to do is attack with everything. They do. So no blocks, you win. The Saprolings deck is not bad. It is better than people give it credit for. And against our particular draw, it was just sticky enough to get there. If I had used, in hindsight, if I had used the Murder instead of the Cast Down the turn prior, I could have pulled back. However, I didn't play around exactly a Tendershoot Dryad and myself being stuck on 6 lands with the Scarab God. But it's good to know that your decisions matter in Magic, and it's a good idea to always watch for places where you could play better. It's part of the improving process. All right. This is not a very good hand to go first with. I really do need more lands. There's a very good chance we won't draw enough to be competitive. However, I have an early Syncopate and an early Fatal Push to buy time for those lands. And I have 2 Gearhulks, which having a pair of 6 drops with 2 lands is really bad. Quite the keeper mull here. I also have a bridge card in Vraska's Contempt. If I get to 4 lands, this can hold me over for a minute. However, if I'm up against control, I'm very likely to just lose because I don't draw more lands. Or at least I'm not as likely to hit my land drops. God, it's really tough. I'm going to gamble that I'm against a creature opponent. Against a creature opponent, this can buy me some time, but still leaves me a ton of trouble. I also have no guarantee I'm going to draw more blue sources. I could also get mana hosed on this hand. I will mulligan it. I've talked myself into seeing enough bad ways that this could go to throw this one back. I would love to know what you would do. Would you keep that or mulligan it? I would love to read that in chat comments. This is very bad, but if there is a... It has more potential than last hand if I just find another hub or another land in the top 2 cards of my library because of the scry. But if I scry a land to the top, the Evolving Wilds can't be sacked. I'm going to try it. There is a land on top. I do need it, which means we're playing Evolving Wilds but not sacrificing it. If we do, we won't for sure draw the land next turn, and we do need it. Okay. My opponent showing me blue-white, which immediately makes me think control. But our hand didn't exactly improve. Oh, that's probably Turbo Fog. Well, the bright side of Turbo Fog is they're unlikely to have an answer to my Siphoner, but let's go find out. Some of them run Censor these days. Alright, our opponent could definitely play their card any time now. There's not a lot of reason to hold the priority and click 3 more times when your opponent's committed. I guess I could still have a land drop, so there's always that. But I don't see any problem with 99% of situations playing Anticipate in response to the Siphoner and making your choice. My choices are made. The things won't change before end step. Almost never. Alright, our opponent Anticipate in the Gift of Paradise. This is exactly the kind of draw they want. I'm very happy that we found a Field of Ruin, though. Field of Ruin can blow up the Glacial Fortress that the Gift of Paradise is on, and I do think I'm going to take that line now before my opponent gets a chance to untap and play Teferi. Easily one of the scariest cards we could play against. I'm going to get a blue source too, so I can have Disallow available for sure next turn. So our path to victory is hopefully we can syncopate a few Nexi of Fate, get those exiled, and just never let our opponent keep a Teferi or a Search for Azcanta if possible. Teferi being the big one, as it's kind of their win condition. If we can exile all of their Planeswalkers with our combination of Vraska's Contempts and Torrential Gearhulks, then our opponent may just be left without a good way to win, including decking us. That is the problem with Nexus of Fate, is eventually, if they draw their whole library, they can just take all the turns, so it's going to be important to have counter magic available for Nexus of Fate, particularly Syncopate, which can exile it. Yeah, we've got a Slow Fog player too, which is very... I mean, their name is The Nerd. We should see this coming. It's very concerning that this could be a really long game. Like right here, if they have a Glimmer of Genius, an Anticipate, or something to cycle, there's not a lot of reason to hesitate. And they seem to have finally made their choice. Alrighty, I'm going to try to contain the Salt and just play it and see how it goes. Yep, there's Teferi. We will not allow it.
Time for plan B.
Indeed, buddy. Alright. It's too bad that we didn't draw another Disallow or an open black source to Vraska's Contempt, the next Teferi that might be on the way. But I can't complain too much about drawing lands that I need, especially another black source for the Contempt. Search for Azcanta, that's one of the cards we hoped to avoid, and we already used a Field of Ruin. That's too bad. I don't know what I can really do against it here. After it's resolved, I think we just have to keep up with it, but eventually our opponent gets enough going that they can just Nexus every turn. So we do have to wear on their life total a little. It's hard when they have so many fogs. This is going to be a tough game. Our opponent's pausing us while I mess with my Siphoner. We also have to watch out for this Hostile Desert, which can exile a land card from our opponent's graveyard to attack. I don't think we'll see it active anytime soon. It is a win con, and we have plenty of things like Fatal Push for it. Just something to keep in mind. These Essence Scatters, Murders, they're unlikely to actually do anything in this game. Our opponent running their timer out here, and possibly even burning a timeout for reasons completely unknown. One might... Oh, another Field of Ruin. That is a blessed sight. So you're telling me there's a chance. Alright, we play this. Now we could slam a Scarab God here, but I like leaving open Vraska's Contempt or Glimmer of Genius, or activating the Field of Ruin. There's nothing to get back yet with the Scarab God. Now you might think Scarab God doesn't have a lot to do in this matchup, but it really does. If we can get creatures into any graveyard, Scarab God can get cards out of those graveyards. And then we can use the zombie thing to drain our opponent. So it's actually a case where we might even end up like fatally pushing our own creature so we can reanimate it, so we can use the Scry Drain to get around fogs. It's kind of wild. I guess we'll see if it happens or not. Our opponent keeps their top card. Very fortunate to find another Field of Ruin, by the way. Our opponent, I think we only have 2, and our opponent may play many more Search for Azkanas, so something to be grateful for. Alright, Glimmer of Genius. Let's see what our opponent does, since they're not taking action. It's also scary to do things on our opponent's end step when they have mana open for a Nexus of Fate, because they could catch us tapped out. And it's something really weird to play around that we're going to have to get used to. More land. It's sort of greedy to bottom these. I think I'll bottom 1. I mean, we do need to hit our land drops, but it's also a reasonable expectation that we'll draw more land with Glint-Sleeve Siphoner going. So I think putting 1 at the bottom is fine. Having the other available seems wise. Our opponent with 6 mana. I am tapped out. It's the end of their turn. I have no idea what they need to use their timer for, but here we go. Just try to stay positive. Alright, I'll play some Aether Hubs because they make energy, making our Siphoner more useful. Combat. Attack. If our opponent wishes to fog this, that is just fine with me, but, I mean, they continue to touch their cards and then do nothing with them. It's like, come on, man. Alright, I'll move to end step, as holding up Torrential Gearhulk with Disallow is the best sounding thing I can think of. Just having counter magic available against this deck so that they don't get their Teferis going and they don't get to play their Nexus sounds great. I'm perfectly fine with them using a Supreme Will, though. Especially if it's not going to like mingle against my Gearhulk. Discarding some removal spells is also totally fine. Like, I'm not worried at all that I have too many cards in my hand. And the more expensive, the better. Cheap Fatal Pushes might be used to put Siphoners in our graveyard to get back with Scarab God. Our opponent's going to flip their search. We'll let them draw. They did keep it on top. We could have activated field then, but I still want to hold a counter available through Torrential Gearhulk if possible. If the opponent does nothing at end step, we can go after the Azcanta. Repeat the mantra. I don't know. I don't really have a mantra. Just trying to think of things that people do in movies and such to stay calm. All right. Our opponent might have another Supreme Will, but we have to take that chance. Because if we just let our opponent have this and then try to Vraska's Contempt it, the same thing could happen. Ooh, resolves. I'll put 2 Teferis in the yard.
Don't make another move.
Turbo Fog, I mean, they could have a commit. There's a lot of things they could have. They could even have Gaia's Blessing. They could have many things to put stuff into to get things back, but many of the lists do not. So, while we're not sure quite what we're up against or quite what our opponent will do, it makes sense to take every shot we can take. All right. So the opponent has another search, so blowing up this one isn't going to be particularly great. We also get to hit our opponent for 7 this turn. I do not have a counterspell available, but I have a Vraska's Contempt, I have an Anticipate, and I have a Glimmer that might get a counterspell. I think it's best to hold back. We're going to at least get our opponent in position where they do need to use a counter of some kind or a fog every turn. That's a lot of work. Search for Azcanta can help, but it's very mana intense. And what they really want to have is a Planeswalker on the field when they start using their fogs. If they don't have that, things aren't half as good for them. And of course these moments are very difficult because if I tap out and my opponent plays Nexus of Fate, then they could untap and play all kinds of things. I think what I'll try for... Yeah, what I'm going to try for is the Anticipate. It's cheap, it leaves up plenty of other mana, and now we have a Disallow. We could also take the Gearhulk, but I think the Disallow is what's called for in this situation. Alright, so still on an end step. Now we can go for the Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. It does open up a window for the Nexus of Fate, but if that happens, I'll still have a Disallow available during the Nexus of Fate turn after this resolves. Because we get to fetch off the Field of Ruin. Yep, our opponent resolves it. So they're going to get another turn. They're going to get to flip their search, but they don't have a win. But I'm at least going to have a Disallow available during that time. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that control players make against Turbo Fog. If you tap out completely, like if I had gone for Glimmer of Genius there, I wouldn't have had mana to Disallow. My opponent can respond if I tap out during their end step by casting the instant speed Nexus of Fate. And when they do that, they get to untap, take another turn, resolve to Fairy, or whatever other very important card they needed to resolve. At least in this case, it looks like my opponent's not going to resolve anything special and pass the turn back to me, which is the best you can hope for. I'm sure the Disallow has a lot to do with that. What we're going to have to decide really soon is how greedy to be with this Disallow. Do we counter Fogs and try to end the game, force our opponent to have all that? Or do we counter to Fairies and not let them find a way to win the game through those means? They're also in that zone where Scarab God might be able to do the work I talked about earlier, so perhaps we should get it online. Settle the wreckage. Well, we definitely don't want that to happen. So we got to try the Disallow on this, I believe. Am I missing anything, any specific thing? We could throw our Glint-Sleeve in the graveyard and murder our Gearhulk and play Scarab God, but taking the pressure off like that seems like a huge mistake. Okay, they have a Root Snare, so they get to see another turn. I can't do anything about that. And they even have the mana to search for its Kanta, which is very frustrating. I'm trying to decide whether or not I need to play the Scarab God here. Leaving the mana open might just be too risky, but at least I could Vraska's Contempt it to Fairy if it came down. So I'm going to end the turn, and let's see what our opponent reveals with this search. It's a very scary search for his Kanta here. If it hits a Nexus, and the opponent can... Well, they need one more land to play Nexus and use his Kanta every sequence, which is also very scary. But they're on one card with a need to fog every turn, and they find another fog. Okay. Is their last card a Nexus of Fate? It's probably not a Teferi. Not the way that our opponent's been throwing them out there. I think there's a reasonable chance it's a Nexus of Fate, but since they didn't play the land, and they can't as Kanta and Nexus, I'm going to go for this Glimmer. Don't need either of you. I need more counters. More counters! Duress. Excellent. So does our opponent Nexus here? He's checking out our graveyard. We've got so many more cards than them. He's going to anticipate and try to find a Nexus. However, even if he finds one, it's just cycling it. Not until he has another land can he really get something out of his extra turn with the search. Or not with the search. This is the, as Kanta, the Sunken Ruin. It's no longer just a search. But the Duress will be great against Settle. Not great against Fog, but great against Settle. Okay, keep the energy count high. And we will Duress you. Yeah, main deck Duress. What have you got? Wow. It's going to take a while to get through this. Our opponent seeing almost every fog in their deck, probably, as we see 3 Haze of Pollens, a Root Snare, the last Haze of Pollen, and another Root Snare here. But they are down to the 1, and when they have most of the ones in their deck, they can't have too many more. So do we play Scarab God? I still don't have anything graveyard to get. My opponent doesn't either. So we'd have to kill our own thing and get it back. And that would start the Scry Drain train, but we'd need to do a lot of that to win. No, I don't think we do. I think we leave the mana open. Do we Glimmer of Genius while we can? That might inform us a little better. I may have to discard more cards, but I think I'm okay with that. No and no. Come on now. Show me those negates. Show me. Ugh. It's painful. It's a very important sequence right there. We needed some answers. Our opponent gets kind of a free play turn here. Let's see what they get with their Azcanta. Anything but you, Teferi. Anything but you. We do have a Contempt. Another Settle. Alright. We might need the murder. Murdering our own Scarab God can save it from a Settle the Wreckage, and it would come back to our hand. Our opponent's well insulated from being attacked, but they do have to keep this up every turn. Yep. But our opponent, again, that's just a cycle. Without another land, they can't do anything with this extra turn. And since they're not going to do anything, maybe they could pass their own turn instead of sitting there. How about that? Just an idea. Just an idea. Ooh, okay, so that's what they're deciding about, whether or not to do that. I think that's really risky, but maybe they're trying to go off. Maybe they are trying to find that Teferi. What other information might they have in their deck? I don't think they've used as Kanta nearly enough to like know the order of their deck right now. Yep, there it is. So in response to its activation, we're going to Contempt it.
I am not going to sit this one out.
Before our opponent can draw the card, as it might very well be another Supreme Will, something that could counter the Contempt. So that's why the timing is what it was. They did find that land. Do they have the mana to Nexus? No, they do not. So you better keep that Settle open. Now the question is, can we find a counter for that Settle? Because I don't believe they have another Fog. And there it is. They have Chart of Course. They tapped wrong. They tapped wrong. Oh, they have the Teferi. I'm sorry. I got excited for a minute. I often forget that. Our opponent did not. All right, help me out. Our opponent, if they found a Fog, might be considering doing it during upkeep, which is the only thing I can think about, but since they pause for everything, we can't actually try to pull information from it. Some may say that's a reason to pause. I say you're killing time from people's lives. Cut it out. Professional player Jerry Thompson calls that Bush League stuff and garbage. So think about that. All right. We can go for this set. We can go to counter this Settle, and I think it's our best chance to win the game. I refuse to believe that he has another Fog. 1, 2, 3, 4. How many Root Snares? 1, 2. I just, you know, if he's got it, he's got it. Let's make him have it. All right, Gearhulk, bring me this one. He's still holding priority. He might be on full control, though. It's possible. Oh! The nerd has had enough. Back to the next epic, insanely long game with somebody else. Yes, we have sent you away. And we pull 850 gold because we definitely completed our spell quests. 40 creature spells, though, that's a lot further to go. 2 wins, 1 loss, a grueling game against Turbofog, but I know that these young CGB videos can run a bit long. I think I should leave it there, and I think we can pick that up in the near future. So yeah, we're gonna drop it for the day. I had a really good time playing the deck. I'm very glad I crafted the cards I did. It made me competitive in these games, and hopefully watching that you can learn some tips on beating up the turbo fogs. Thank you so much for coming out and supporting the adventures of young CGB. Remember to leave me comments and just all the feedback I've gotten on this series that I've received. All the feedback I've received on this series that's been positive. I appreciate you very much. You can always come by the Discord. We've got sections for the deck lists as well as other starter deck lists that you can play. We've also got sections where you can get advice on decks that you're building from other players. And I pop in there and do my best to also keep up as well. I was off all weekend, so I did a lot of catch up today. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.